Okay, Nick, part three. Sam Carson, PS. Having never been closed or restricted, should he stop? And second part of his question, would you still bet in a race where certain, in inverted commas, dodgy trainers have a runner?
No, if you've not been closed or restricted, you don't need to stop. But it might be that you're punting at a small enough level where even if you're winning a little bit, you're not on the firm's radars. Could use the example of my dad, who's been a mug. He won't even mind me saying, he's a mug style punter, just a fun punter for 40, 50 years. Who now, for the first time, he's making us, because of concessions and best odds guaranteed and extra places and all that kind of thing, and bet boosts and all, is actually making a small profit for the first time. But he'll never get restricted or closed because his biggest bet's a tenner. So if you're doing that and enjoying it, you'll never get restricted and closed, but that's great fun. Sorry, what was the second part about?
Would you bet in a dodgy trainers?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but you factor in everything you know. And it's the same with dodgy football teams. If you're doing Serie B in Italy, in Italy, you know that occasionally some of the games might be a draw, and that might have been arranged beforehand. But you factor in the possibility that it might have happened. And if you've got, racing's not my specialist subject, but if you've got a trainer who might have a reputation for horses finishing out the back when they drift, or needing 3 runs to get a handicap mark. I'm using really elementary examples because that's my extent of my racing knowledge. But you factor that into what you do, and you can't not bet on a race just because a trainer's got a runner in there. It's not like he's up to something in every race anyway, is it? Because otherwise he wouldn't have his license anymore. You wouldn't think. So you just account for little things in races, and that's no different to accounting for a horse that's been off the track for a year. And does that trainer have a good record with horses that have been off the track for a year or not? Or horses that have got a interesting temperament, say the Gary Moore horse, Goshen, and stuff like that. You know that horse can, on any given day, could do something completely different. So it's just taking the information at your disposal and using it accordingly, and factoring those into your pricing and your confidence around your price. This is a really important thing. It's all very well for punters to price an event themselves and bet around those prices, but you've also got to factor in how confident you are that your prices are right. Because I could price a Premier League match tomorrow and be absolutely confident every piece of information I require goes into my price, and what comes out is what I'm happy with, and I'll bet around that price. If I do the same in Scottish League 2, where I can't get hold of the team news, there may be some factors in the market which I don't know about. If I then have the same confidence in that price than I had in the Premier League one, that's going to cause me problems, because I just can't be as sure that my closing price is right, or as right as I think it is on the first one.
Okay, I assume this next one is possibly an in-joke as well. Matt Swad wants to know, who is it? Matt Swad, who is the rudest person in the gambling industry, in your opinion?
The rudest person in the betting industry? I don't really know any sort of rude people. I guess that there's funny in this industry. You do work with some people who are absolutely hilarious. I will name check two. I guess the two funniest humans I've ever worked with in the industry would be Adrian McCarthy at Stan James and a guy called Lance Cornwell, who I worked with in Malta. Both of those guys have me in hysterics almost every minute of every day. Just two funny blokes.
Okay, next question from Zilzar89. With cash betting becoming rarer by the day, will there still be betting shops in 10 years' time?
Wow, I hope so, and I'd like to think so. But the way it's going, you do have to worry about how many betting shops will be left. If you've only got to look at high streets over the last 2 years and see how many have gone, and how many we're left with. I know a lot of that is a result of the FOB-T changes, but even in the last year, there have been more closing. And also you have to worry about the importance that they're viewed within the major firms. And they almost seem like a a problem they don't need anymore. A few of the big firms, you feel. Whereas someone like Ben Keith is opening more and more Star Sports shops and they look lovely inside every time they do one of these openings. And, he's got still a smallish, but a decent number of shops there. But I don't know whether there's going to be more of those independents popping up and having 10 and 20 shops, because the amount of data costs makes it really hard for that model to work. And you've got to be as good at it as Ben to make it work. And I just think most independents won't be as good at it as Ben. And I don't think that the big firms really want the shops anymore. So, you do have to worry about the future of betting shops, yeah.
Okay, and Bad Man Me wants to know, do you still bet in them?
Nowhere near the extent to what I did. But yeah, I still do. I still have some people out there do some of my anti-post betting for me, or at major racing festivals. I'll go around the shops and do some myself. But 4 and 5 years ago, I used to go out and do some of the shop stuff myself. And used to sort of, like I said at the beginning, I just wanted as much turnover as I could get in the early days that was decent turnover. And a lot of that was available in shops, whether that was each way multis at racing festivals, or football coupon prices where I thought that they would move. Now, this was a good thing with the football coupons, because the firms are hell bent on stopping arbors to the extent they've forgotten how to stop anyone else. So if you bet on football coupons in the shops and you want £2,000 on a football match, they get rung up to the trader, and all he checks is whether it's the right price on Betfair or not. But if you're confident on a Wednesday that price will move by a Saturday, but hasn't moved at the moment, they used to lay you a bet. Now, that's changing a bit now as well. But this absolute obsession in firms of not laying arbors created opportunities to get on where you knew a price was wrong, but it wasn't an arb yet. But those situations dying out. The racing stuff is getting harder to make money on in the shops. So going into betting shops myself now, I haven't done it for ages, and having other people out and betting shop runners for me, pretty much dead now too. So that's another game which I've kind of given up in the last couple of years.
Right, okay, Nick, we're getting to the nitty gritty now, stuff that I know you want to talk about. Swanzalona 1. He says, I noticed Nick states yawn with a reference to the Australian model. As a punter that bets into Australia daily, as a dog punter, it's so much better than trying to get a bet into the UK. But I agree that the Australian model of NBL can be improved. Does Nick know exactly how the NBL works in Australia? And if so, how would he improve it for the GB model? Minimum bet.
Yeah, I know pretty much how it works, because one of my best mates is a rugby league punter and bases himself in Australia 6 months a year, and so we do some stuff into Australia while he's out there and can do it. So we made it our business to understand exactly how it was working out there. Right. So minimum bet limits. I think people have got into their head now that I detest the idea, and that's not necessarily true. I think that minimum bet limits would be a solution. I just don't think they're the best solution. I think so. To start with, the starting point in this country, in our industry, compared to what it was in Australia, is completely different. And I think it's worked okay in Australia, and it's not been, it's not destroyed their industry. And I don't think it would here either. And I think that if the industry doesn't wake up to the direction of travel, and the change in sentiment amongst the public, at some point, it may have minimum bet limits forced upon it. And I hear people say, no, that won't happen. It can't happen. Might not be legal. But I heard all this about the responsible gambling debate 7, 8, 10 years ago. And I heard it because I was in there. And I was one of the people saying, oh, this will never happen. You'll never have to ask shop punters for source of funds. You'll never have to have an affordability checks at a couple of £100. Well, it is happening. It's happening now. And we put our heads in the clouds about it back then. And that's happening now with this debate. And lots of people within the industry are saying, rightly, to the fact that restrictions have always been the case. So in terms of a minimum bet limit, bookmakers have never, even when they were on street corners in the 60s, have never had to take a bet. There's always been the option to knock people back. and I wouldn't want that to be to disappear. And you hear people in the industry saying things like, I don't know. They're just in denial at the moment about how much things have changed, and saying like it's still not that big a deal. But if you're caught up in something every day and it changes a minuscule amount day by day, you can't see it. I don't notice my children getting taller because I see them every day. But if someone comes along that hasn't seen them for 3 months, they've noticed it. And it's a similar thing happening here. People from the outside take a glance in every now and again, and they'll see what's happening. And we're getting more in the media, people writing about this now. And I just think the general public in general are. So if you go out now and tell people that you punt for a living, this question will come up sometimes. Do you have your accounts closed? Do bookies not take your bets? 10 years ago, this didn't happen. No one would have come up to me and asked me that question. It wasn't on their radar and they didn't care. But public sentiment has changed in terms of fairness now. People are obsessed with, especially giant corporations in all sectors, not just betting, acting fairly, ethically. And there will become a time when the big companies get more and more scrutiny if they're seen as not perceived, even the perception that they're not acting fairly. And this is coming in the next few years. And I believe that some of the top people in the big corporations actually see. In fact, I know they do. I know that there's some interest in looking at what they can do because they do feel like this restrictions culture has gone a bit too far. But for anything to change, it's going to need to come from those at the very top, the boardroom members of the big merged firms. I don't think it can come at the small to medium-sized firms initially, because it's really, and some of them have tried it and found it really hard to bring in minimum bet limits. And what I think needs to happen is that one of the big corporations needs to almost say, we're going to present you a new deal, there's going to be a new mentality for layers. And I don't think they even need to change that much, but they need to understand and embrace that some of the things happening look really bad and aren't good for the industry as a whole. So the example of a guy getting offered £1.41 on a Grand National bet, 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks before the race, whatever it is, that kind of thing just has to stop. And there's still too many people in the industry who don't agree with that. We think it's fine. It's not affecting that many people, but it is. It's affecting more people. And at the moment, I feel like there's just a bit of a defeatist attitude, a can't do attitude within the industry. I just think like the industry's been kicked too hard from too many angles, and it's got everyone down. The media, the government, the gambling commission, the public, everyone is on the case of the betting industry at the moment, and it's thrown up a situation where they almost don't want to be proactive because they've lost the energy to do it. But I do believe that if you could just make some small changes, introduce this new deal where you look at a certain amount of markets, and let's say for the giant firms, they take these only markets where they expect to take X thousand bets. And that might be major football matches, top 2 divisions, Cheltenham. You don't even need a minimum bet limit for me on the 4 o'clock at Fakenham on a Wednesday. You don't need it there. But at the major racing festivals, the major days, the major meetings, you've got to stop laying people £4, even if they're smart. Lay anyone a bet to, and not just £500, where the Australian thing is. I think that's a cop out. At Cheltenham on Supreme Novices Day, and don't do this each way, don't do it where you've got offers. I'm not asking anyone to facilitate arbors or bad each way people and give it away. That's not what this is about. But get into a culture where every price on major events, big football matches, major sporting events, Cheltenham, Royal Ascot, etc., every price, there's someone who's accountable for it. There's a trader who knows why that price is there. And if you lay a bet to someone you think's warm on that price, a fair bet, you change it, and you actively manage the market and trade it somewhere approaching an old-fashioned way. There's still people inside the big firms that are willing, able, and capable of doing this, but they've almost had it. They've had it knocked into them that they're not allowed to do this anymore, or it's not the right way to do it anymore. And it still can be, and it still is. But it requires someone at the big firms, I think, to say, we're going to make this change. And if they do it, yeah, in the early, there might be some teething problems. There might be a small leak of a very small amount of margin in the early days. But once they learn to trade those markets properly and become more skilled at it, I think that actually there'll be no impact on them.